Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We're launching into a deep dive across eight really critical sources today. We'll be covering everything from geopolitics and grassroots democracy right through to, well, ant genetics and the changing workforce.
Quite a range. Our mission, as always, is to sort of unpack the key insights from these pieces for you.
Absolutely. Let's kick things off with India's conditional engagement with the Taliban. It's a tricky diplomatic dance, really, framed by that long disputed Pakistan-Afghanistan border.
It is tricky, and the timing here is, well, it's fascinating. You had the highest level contact, yet Taliban Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi visiting India.
Right.
And that happened almost exactly when Pakistan was bombing targets inside Kabul. That visible rift between Kabul and Islamabad, that gives India an opening.
An opening to do what exactly? Signal something more.
Precisely, to signal a potential upgrade to its technical mission there, maybe even resume some development projects that have been stalled. It's all about careful conditional steps.
Okay, so New Delhi's being cautious, gradual. What are the core strategic goals India is trying to achieve with this approach? There must be specific objectives.
Yeah, there are three main ones. First, simply protecting the substantial investment India made in Afghanistan between 2001 and 2021. That's around $3 billion.
Oh, okay. Makes sense. Protect the investment.
Second, and this is really crucial, preventing Afghan soil from becoming a base for anti-India militants. They definitely don't want a repeat of the 1990s.
A major security concern, obviously.
And third, India is looking to, as the analysis puts it, explore the autonomy of the Taliban from their masters. Basically trying to see if Kabul can act independently of Islamabad, Rawalpindi, and stop Pakistan gaining that strategic depth.
Right. Undermining Pakistan's influence, that desire to sort of leverage Taliban autonomy, that must fuel the argument for formal recognition, surely. What's the case for just recognizing the regime now?
Well, the pragmatic case rests on a couple of things. One, the Taliban seems much more consolidated now compared to the 90s. They control the territory. More stable, relatively speaking.
Relatively, yes. And second, look at the region. Russia has formally recognized them. China's exchanged ambassadors. Plus, the main military threat to the Taliban isn't really the old NRF, the resistance, it's ISIS-Khorasan.
Okay, so regional players are moving on, the internal threat landscape has shifted, but India often emphasizes principles, human rights. Doesn't recognition basically give away any leverage India has on those issues, especially women's rights?
That's the huge counterargument. It absolutely does risk minimizing leverage. The Taliban's regime is uniquely concerning in its totalitarianism, banning girls from secondary school, barring women from most workplaces. It's severe.
And the economic situation is dire too, right?
Dire's putting it mildly. The economy shrank by a third. Almost 23 million people need humanitarian aid. Recognition doesn't fix that, and it might even ease pressure on the Taliban to reform.
And then there's the UN report. That seems like a major sticking point. What did the Security Council Monitoring Group find about their ties to terror groups? Yeah, that report is pretty damning for the Taliban's claims. It found they remained the primary partner of all foreign terrorist groups in Afghanistan. It explicitly names Al-Qaeda, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba.
So these groups are still there, even if quiet.
Exactly. And the Haqqani network is deeply integrated into the regime. The UN report makes it clear the peace is conditional, the links persist. It's a massive hurdle for recognition.
So even though China and Russia have moved ahead, India should hold back. Why not just get a seat at the table?
The argument against is that short-term realpolitik is too risky here. Formal recognition gives the Taliban the legitimacy they desperately crave, and it pretty much shuts down India's ability to push for freedoms for inclusion. The reality is the Taliban probably needs India's help more right now, given the economy and their issues with Pakistan, than India needs to rush into recognition.
Okay, that makes sense. Holding on to leverage. Let's shift gears completely now from international power plays to power at the very grassroots. We're looking at the Gram Sabha, often called the unsung hero of Indian democracy. Article 243A, right.
That's the one. It's a constitutional foundation for local self-governance. The Gram Sabha is, in theory, the purest form of direct democracy. We have every single registered voter in a village coming together to discuss budgets, development plans, hold officials accountable.
So why isn't it more, well, aspirational? Why don't we hear more about it?
That's the core problem. Our civics education, our curriculum, tends to focus heavily on the higher legislative bodies, Parliament, the Lok Sabha, the Vidhan Sabhas. Local governance often gets treated as this dry, administrative thing, not as a vital part of being a citizen. There's a real disconnect.
And that disconnect is what the new Model Youth Gram Sabha, the MYGS, is trying to fix. Tell us about that initiative.
Exactly. It was launched in 2025 by several key ministries. The idea is simple but powerful. Simulate a real Gram Sabha in schools. Students take on roles, sarpanch, panchayat members, health workers, engineers, ordinary citizens.
So they actually debate things like village budgets.
Yes, they debate budgets, they propose development projects, they learn about local issues and processes firsthand.
Mhm.
It transforms civics from, just reading a textbook into a lived experience. It makes it immediate, relatable.
And the scale sounds pretty ambitious for phase one. Over 1,000 schools involved.
That's right, over 1,000 schools, including places like the Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas, the JNVs, and the Eklavya Model Residential Schools. They're really trying to reach a broad base, and the pilot programs have shown real promise.
Like the one in Siddipur.
Yeah, the JNV Siddipur pilot had over 300 students participating. The idea is to nurture civic pride at the local level. If Model UN helps create global citizens, the MYGS aims to create engaged local leaders. It teaches really practical skills too: debate, negotiation, consensus building, understanding your rights.
It does sound fundamental if you're aiming for something like the Viksit Bharat vision, the developed India goal. How does it connect?
I think the connection is crucial. That vision can't just be about top-down policies from Delhi. It needs active participation from the ground up. When kids learn that their village meeting is just as important in its own way as parliament, then democracy becomes less of an abstract concept.
It becomes part of the culture.
Exactly. It becomes a lived culture where every child feels their voice actually matters, starting right there in their own community.
Okay, sticking with big picture ideas and influential figures, let's talk about Bill Gates. There's been a noticeable shift in how he talks about climate change, hasn't there? Moving away from that apocalyptic urgency.
A very noticeable shift.
Yes.
Between roughly 2019 and 2021, his message was very much about the imminent threat, the urgency. Now, he's moderated that significantly. He's been saying things like, while climate change is serious, it won't threaten humanity's survival. That's quite a change in tone.
And the danger there is how people hear that message, right? Tone often
Yeah.
registers more than the scientific nuance. What's the risk of this kind of overcorrection?
The risk is significant misinterpretation. People might hear the softened tone and think the problem isn't so bad after all, leading to complacency or even backlash against climate action. There's also this concern about what's called the substitution logic.
Substitution logic, what do you mean?
Well, when he emphasizes prioritizing things like poverty reduction or disease control to help vulnerable populations adapt, some might misread that as, oh, it's okay to keep polluting now as long as we help the poor adapt later. It potentially undermines the need to tackle mitigation and adaptation simultaneously. It can sound like an either-or, which it isn't.
Right, suggesting we can trade off action now for adaptation later. Let's check his claim of significant progress on emissions against the actual data. Does it hold up?
Not really. The data shows a bit of a contradiction. Global fossil fuel emissions actually hit record highs between 2022 and 2024. Now, the rate of growth did slow down from about 3% annually to maybe 0.5%.
So it's still growing, just slower. That's not exactly progress in reducing emissions.
Precisely. It's slowing growth, not reduction. Plus, there's still a lot of uncertainty around emissions from land use change, so claiming overall progress seems premature based on the available data.
And politically, this shift in tone has already had consequences, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Climate change denialists have jumped on it. Donald Trump, for instance, used Gates' moderated statements to claim he'd won the war on the climate change hoax. It provides ammunition to those resisting climate action.
Which highlights the immense influence someone like Gates has. His background in tech, the whole disruptive narrative.
Exactly. His authority comes partly from that tech success story. But the model of philanthropy he represents, where huge private wealth effectively sets global priorities, can sometimes bypass the slower, maybe messier process of democratic deliberation on critical issues like climate strategy. His messaging gets amplified and, as we saw, sometimes co-opted.
Okay, let's link that idea of technological influence directly to the workforce. We're seeing this strange paradox. Huge companies like Amazon, Meta, Microsoft laying off thousands, while at the same time pouring massive amounts of money into artificial intelligence.
It does seem paradoxical, doesn't it? But the key nuance here is that AI isn't directly causing the layoffs in most cases. It's more of an indirect consequence. Companies are fundamentally restructuring their strategies around AI capabilities.
So it's about prioritizing different skills.
Exactly. They're prioritizing employees who have AI skills, investing heavily in those areas, and reshaping their business models. This strategic shift often makes older roles or roles requiring different skill sets redundant. It's less AI took my job and more my company's AI strategy changed the jobs it needs.
And the scale of these recent cuts seems concentrated, right? Fewer companies laying off, but bigger cuts per company.
That's what the data suggests. In 2025, fewer companies announced layoffs compared to the previous couple of years, but the average number of employees cut per company almost doubled between 2023 and 2025, jumping from around 221 to 517. It points to larger, more focused restructuring efforts, especially in big tech and retail.
Which industries are leading these layoffs?
The breakdown shows hardware companies are at the front, accounting for about 28% of the layoffs, followed by retail at around 14%. It clearly reflects this tech-driven churn.
But it's not all negative. There's a huge demand side to this story with AI, isn't there? Particularly in hiring.
Absolutely. While some jobs are disappearing or changing, there's been a significant surge in recruitment for AI talent globally. And interestingly, India seems to be leading this charge, relatively speaking, with an AI hiring rate over 33% higher than the global average.
A real boom in demand for AI skills. And are those skills commanding higher salaries?
Oh, definitely. There's a substantial wage premium. Workers with AI skills are reportedly earning, on average, 56% more than the average salary. This premium is especially high in sectors like energy and information communication. It shows just how much value companies are placing on these skills right now.
It really underlines the transformation.
Yeah.
And the investment numbers back that up.
Completely. Corporate investment in AI hit something like $252.3 billion in 2024. That's 13 times higher than just a decade ago. It's a massive capital shift driving this workforce restructuring.
Okay, let's leave the world of AI and corporate strategy for something, well, completely different. Myrmecology, the study of ants. There's a really surprising finding about ant queens cloning in different species. It sounds like it breaks basic biology rules.
It really does challenge some fundamental assumptions. It's a fascinating case study. To get our heads around it, we need a quick refresher on how ants normally reproduce.
Okay, ant reproduction 101. Basically, females, the queens, and the workers develop from fertilized eggs. They're diploid, meaning they have two sets of chromosomes, one from the mother queen, one from the father drone. Males, the drones, develop from unfertilized eggs. They're haploid, only one set of chromosomes, all from the mother.
Got it. Diploid females, haploid male. So what's happening with these specific ants? Mesoribericus and Mesostructor, the Iberian ant queen mates with both species.
That's the setup. The M. ibericus queen mates with males of her own species and males of the M. structor species. Now, when an egg is fertilized by M. structor sperm, it develops into a sterile hybrid worker ant. Okay, that's unusual, but understandable.
Hybrid workers, okay. And unfertilized eggs become...
Unfertilized eggs develop into normal M. ibericus drones, the queen's own species males, also expected. The big puzzle was, where were the pure M. structor drones coming from? They were found in the M. ibericus colonies.
Right. How can an M. ibericus queen produce males of a completely different species?
This is the wild part. The researchers figured out that the M. ibericus queen has a mechanism to eliminate her own chromosomes from some of her eggs before fertilization. She essentially creates an empty egg cell, genetically speaking, containing only her mitochondria.
An empty egg. Wow.
Yes. And when one of these chromosomeless eggs gets fertilized by sperm from an M. structor male, the resulting individual is haploid, containing only the single set of chromosomes from the M. structor father. It develops into a pure M. structor drone.
So it's effectively a clone of the father's contribution produced by the mother of a different species.
Exactly. And because they all come from the same process using sperm from M. structor males fertilizing these empty eggs, these M. structor drones are essentially clones of one another, genetically speaking, apart from the mitochondria.
Incredible. What was the definitive genetic proof for this? How did they confirm it wasn't just, contamination or something?
The key was mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA. Mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell, have their own small loop of DNA, and crucially, they are inherited almost exclusively from the mother through the egg cytoplasm.
Okay, so mtDNA comes only from the mother queen.
Right. So they tested the M. structure drones found in the M. ibericus nests. These drones had the nuclear DNA, the main chromosomes of M. structure. But their mitochondrial DNA was M. ibericus. It could only have come from the Iberian queen's egg. That was the smoking gun.
That's amazing. The mother species is essentially acting as a surrogate cloner for another species' males. The researchers use a really provocative comparison. Organelles at the superorganism level. What did they mean by that?
Yeah, that's a mind-bending concept. They're drawing an analogy to endosymbiosis, the ancient process where mitochondria chloroplasts, which were once free-living bacteria, were essentially captured and domesticated by early eukaryotic cells to become integral parts, organelles, within the cell.
So the ant colony is the cell in this analogy.
Kind of. The colony acts as a superorganism. And these cloned M structure males, produced using the queen's cellular machinery, the egg cytoplasm with her mitochondria, but carrying the alien genome, are likened to domesticated components like organelles functioning within that larger superorganism. The colony is replicating an alien genome for its own complex reproductive strategy.
Truly bizarre and fascinating. Okay, let's make another sharp turn from the microscopic world of ant genetics to the complex political landscape of Bihar. This election is being framed as a real test, isn't it? Welfare dependency versus structural transformation, all against a backdrop of poverty.
Absolutely. Bihar faces significant challenges: low per capita income, high multidimensional poverty, and the election dynamics are becoming increasingly volatile, driven by two key demographic shifts.
What are those shifts?
First, women voters. Their turnout is consistently high, often exceeding men's. Think back to 2015, 60.48% turnout for women versus 53.32% for men. Welfare schemes, things like the free bicycle program or the Ujjwala gas cylinders, seem to have given many women a degree of independence from traditional, often patriarchal voting dictates. They're a powerful and somewhat independent voting bloc.
Interesting. And the second shift, the youth.
Yes, the youth. Particularly in the rapidly urbanizing areas, younger voters seem increasingly focused on issues like governance, jobs, education, rather than just voting along traditional caste lines. This makes the old arithmetic of caste coalitions much less predictable. It fragments the electorate.
You see this playing out in the urban centers, right? The NDA alliance often does well in places like Patna, largely due to visible infrastructure projects, new roads, the metro. It creates an image of performance.
It does create that image, that optic of development, but it's often a paradox. This visible progress can mask deeper structural problems, like the persistent lack of quality industrial jobs, which fuels huge outmigration. And even where the NDA wins, the victory margins are often shrinking. Sometimes winners get barely 20% of all registered voters, suggesting a lot of underlying discontent despite the visible projects.
So we have this clear contrast in approaches, the NDA pushing this performance narrative, and the opposition Mahagathbandhan, the MGB, relying more on populist appeals.
That's the basic contest. The MGB's manifesto often includes promises like free electricity, cash transfers, classic patronage-based mobilization. It's a very different appeal compared to the NDA's governance and intra-focus.
How does the poverty data, like from the Niti Aayog index, map onto this political divide? Does it show these two Bihars?
It really does. The multidimensional poverty index data highlights the asymmetry. You can contrast a region like Seedbed, which has very high poverty rates and where political mobilization often relies heavily on targeted welfare and identity politics, with Patna, which has the lowest poverty rate but where voters are more likely to scrutinize governance performance, leading to a more fragmented vote.
And now there's a new factor, Prashant Kishore's Jan Swaraj movement. What's their angle? Who are they appealing to?
They seem to be directly targeting that youth frustration, particularly around unemployment and migration. They're pushing what's described as a governance-first narrative, trying to break away from the old transactional patronage model entirely.
So the election really boils down to this fundamental choice.
Pretty much. It's a contest between perpetuating the old clientelist model, where votes are traded for specific benefits or based on identity, versus embracing a new kind of politics that demands real accountability, structural change, and critical evaluation of performance from its leaders. Which Bihar will prevail is the big question.
Okay, moving from political systems potentially decaying or transforming, let's talk about digital platforms. There's this widespread feeling, isn't there, that so many online services just get worse over time. Author Cory Doctorow has a term for this, Enshittification.
Chuckles lightly. It's
Yeah.
a blunt term, but it captures the feeling perfectly, doesn't it? That sense that platforms deliberately degrade. Doctorow lays out this predictable three-stage death cycle that many platforms seem to follow.
Right, the life cycle of decay. Can you walk us through those three stages?
Sure. Stage 1. The platform starts by being really good to its users. It offers a great service, often below cost, to attract a large user base and build network effects. Think early Facebook or maybe early Amazon.
Get everyone hooked? Stage 2.
Stage 2. Once the users are locked in, the platform starts to abuse them to benefit its business customers, advertisers, sellers, creators. They tweak algorithms, introduce more ads, harvest more data. The user experience starts to degrade, but leaving is hard because everyone else is still there.
Squeezing the users for the businesses. And stage 3.
Stage 3. The platform, now dominant, starts to abuse the business customers too, clawing back all the value for itself. They hike ad prices, charge high commissions, promote their own products over third-party sellers. Eventually, the platform becomes this enshittified mess, extracting maximum value until it collapses or people finally flee.
We definitely see symptoms of this all over. Can you give some concrete examples people will recognize?
Oh, easily. Look at YouTube or streaming services.
Yeah.
Endless, unskippable ads constantly pushing you towards the paid subscription. YouTube actively blocking ad blockers is a classic stage 2-3 move.
Social media, too.
Absolutely. Instagram prioritizing algorithmically chosen commercial videos, often reels from accounts you don't follow, over posts from your actual friends. Or X, formerly Twitter, selling verification badges, which immediately led to a flood of scammers and bots, completely degrading trust and usability. That's stage 3 decay.
And e-commerce. Amazon.
Amazon search results are often cited. They can feel like an endless scroll of paid results, where sponsored products or Amazon's own brands dominate, making it harder to find the best actual product. And think about the difficulty people report in canceling Amazon Prime. The FTC even sued them over that, alleging dark patterns. That's about locking users in and extracting value.
Even basic search isn't immune. Google.
Right. Google's new generative AI overviews, while sometimes useful, can also serve up this error-prone mishmash of content scraped from elsewhere. And critics argue it often self-preferences Google's own services or content over linking out to original sources, further squeezing publishers a stage 3 symptom.
So what allows this process to happen? What are the underlying factors that enable or constrain this enshittification?
Dr. Rowe identifies 4 key factors. When these are weak, enshittification thrives. First, lack of competition. Big tech's dominance means users and businesses often have nowhere else to go. Second, weak regulation. Antitrust enforcement hasn't kept pace, allowing platforms to gain and abuse monopoly power.
Okay, competition and regulation. What else?
Third, diminished user self-help. Things like effective ad blocking or tools for data portability get harder to use as platforms actively fight them. And fourth, weak unionization among tech workers. Organized workers might push back against decisions that harm users or degrade the service for profit, but tech unions are still relatively uncommon. When these 4 constraints are weak, platforms tend towards decay.
It's a compelling, if depressing, framework.
Yeah.
All right, for our final piece, let's end on a potentially more positive note, though one still facing scrutiny. We're looking at Kerala, which is preparing to declare itself India's first state free from extreme poverty. That's a remarkable achievement, going from nearly 60% poverty in the 70s to 0.7% today.
It is truly remarkable, and the process behind it was incredibly detailed and grassroots focused. They mobilized around 4 lakh enumerators, volunteers, officials, community workers across the state.
4 lakh, that's huge. What were they doing?
They went door to door, essentially, to identify every single extremely poor family or individual. They used 4 key parameters based on the UN's Sustainable Development Goals: lack of access to food, healthcare, secure income, and safe housing. Through this intensive survey, they identified just over 64,000 families living in extreme poverty.
And it was just people slightly below the poverty line.
No, these were often people living in incredibly marginalized situations, sometimes completely isolated. The report mentions finding one individual living alone in a country boat, completely cut off. That's the level of detail they went into.
So identification was key, but how did they actually lift these families out of poverty? Was it just cash handouts?
That's the crucial part. It wasn't a single uniform solution. The success seems to lie in the creation of tailored microplans for each family or individual. There was no rigid, one-size-fits-all approach.
Can you give an example of a microplan?
Yes, the article highlights Ambika Devi's case. She had a health condition that prevented her doing heavy labor. So instead of just a standard welfare payment, her microplan involved providing funds specifically to set up a small grocery shop near her home, something she could manage, and which provided a sustainable livelihood. Others might have needed help accessing health care, maybe funding for an organ transplant or securing land rights. It was very specific to the need.
That level of customization requires incredible coordination across government departments, surely.
Absolutely critical. The local self-governance department, the LSGD, played the central coordinating role. but they worked closely with almost every other department. The Revenue Department helped identify land for the landless. Civil Supplies issued priority ration cards for food security. The Transport Department even offered free travel passes for things like hospital visits. It was a genuinely integrated, whole-of-government effort driven from the local level up.
And then sometimes required real dedication, almost detective work, like that story about Shai Varghese.
That story is amazing. Shai Varghese was visually challenged and desperately needed housing. But to get housing aid under the state's Life Mission Project, he needed his share of the ancestral land partitioned. The problem was, his brother had been missing for 27 years.
27 years.
Yes. Local officials, Panchayat members, they didn't give up. They actually traced his missing brother, persuaded him to come back and sign the necessary papers to partition the land. Only then could Shai get the housing aid. And they didn't stop there. They also helped him set up a small livelihood, playing recorded music, providing a music box and microphones. That's extraordinary commitment.
It really is. Now, while this achievement is being celebrated, it's important to include the criticisms as well. What are the main points of contention?
There are a few significant ones. The BJP state president, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, publicly claimed the success was primarily due to union government schemes, not the state's efforts, and accused the state government of propaganda. Though the Kerala chief minister did challenge him to name the specific central schemes responsible.
Okay, so political pushback. Any other concerns?
Yes. A major criticism came from the Adivasi Gotra Sabha, representing tribal communities. They argued the survey methodology itself was flawed and significantly undercounted poverty among scheduled tribes. They pointed out that STs made up only 5% of the identified extremely poor families, which they believe is far too low, arguing many tribal people remained landless and homeless and were missed by the survey.
That's a serious methodological concern. Any other groups raise issues?
There were also protests from ASO workers, the frontline health workers who were involved in the survey and support efforts. They protested their low honorarium, around $223 per day, questioning the government's own definition of poverty when the workers implementing the anti-poverty schemes were themselves struggling. This did prompt the government to increase their monthly honorarium by $1,000.
Right, highlighting the complexities even within success. So what's next? Is this a one-off declaration, or is there a plan for sustainability?
They're already focused on that. The LSGD is reportedly working on Phase 2, which is all about ensuring these gains are sustained, making sure these 64,000 families don't fall back into extreme poverty. It involves continued monitoring and support.
So despite the valid criticisms and challenges, the Kerala story seems to offer a powerful example.
I think it does. It suggests that with sustained, systematic, decentralized political will and that crucial cross-departmental coordination, it is actually possible to achieve significant structural transformation, even tackling something as entrenched as extreme poverty. It turns what often seems like an impossible vision into something tangible.
A hopeful note on the power of focused governance, perhaps.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.